Welcome to Cognitive Liberty. I'm your host, Clyde Lewis. This show is brought to you by TLBTV and the Liberty Beacon Project. Hi, everybody. I'm Clyde Lewis, and welcome again to Cognitive Liberty. I'm the host of Cognitive Liberty right here on the Liberty Beacon TV network. Today, we have Richard Allen Miller on the show, and I've had great interviews with him in the past. We were actually together at a comic convention of all places, where we actually, enlighten people about what's going on behind the scenes at a Comic-Con. And I thought that was kind of a strange place, Richard, for us, you and I, especially in our field and where we develop our ideas and opinions, that we were at a Comic-Con spreading the words of what's deep into the treachery of the conspiracy world, or at least the world of metaphysics and paranormal and all these other things. Now, the good thing about you is that you have an intelligence background that we can actually talk about almost anything. But I think one of the best things that has happened to me, I think recently, is with the Las Vegas shooting and the massacre. I have such a concern for what happened there, and I've been following up on a lot of things. But I find it interesting that, and I was talking with a police officer the other day, and we were discussing the situation, and he said to me that he finds it very, very interesting that since the shooting, I've had all of my contacts, confidants, friends, sources within the intelligence community coming to me and giving information that the people need to hear about the whole setup in the matrix of the shooting. Now, we haven't given anything concrete as to motive, nothing concrete as to whatever, because of the police gag orders. But those who are in intelligence, we've had John Carmen, we had Chip Tatum, Billy Hayes, all of these individuals that have seen this type of behavior before in those who run drugs and traffic guns and even human trafficking involved with this, and how some of these deals go awry. What is your take on this, Richard, about the possibility that there's even greater conspiracy going on here with the Las Vegas shooting?
Imagination is reality, which means pretty much anything you could conceive of in your mind's eye on what actually happened is probably true.
So, in your background,
all of it, laundering money, a false flag, FEMA experiment, FEMA doing an experiment, let's take advantage, let's get a body count so we can close down, the vote on automatic weapons. There's half a dozen possible reasons why this false flag went south.
One of the most important things I think that people need to remember is that Las Vegas is one of the most secure cities in the country. They're a city that has they don't have tight gun laws, and they're very secure because of the fact that they're dealing with money exchanges and gambling and all that, and they have all the, I guess, the sins you probably want in a city, and yet they're probably one of the more safest cities.
One of my fans is a bookkeeper for MGM, and she's right in there, knows exactly all of what's going on. And the security systems that are in place right now, they should have had the shooter within 1 minute. That's how accurate and tight the camera systems are just in and out of a casino. Upstairs in the rooms, they would have had that room vacated within a minute and a half of the shooting as it started. It was 47 minutes. That's impossible. That means there was some kind of compliance going on with the hotel.
Now,
that's one absolutely. There it is. You can't ignore it. And
when I talked to Chip Tatum, because I was saying, well, having a meeting with perhaps ISIS or some other informant, or maybe even a drug cartel individual at a place like the Mandalay Bay, I go, is that common? And he says, hell, we used to sit back and make deals with guns and drugs in bars at casinos, bars in places where we were out in the open and no one really paid attention. That's what's so weird about this, is that this open conspiracy, as I see it, the open conspiracy is there, and yet there's so many people that take offense to the idea of those who wish to at least investigate, and having all these people coming out of the woodwork who are in intel even people that, in fact, this police officer told me that he felt that some of the people that were calling my show were criminals. That some of the criminals, even the criminal minds, were calling the program to say, well, you know, and it did sound like I had some guy say that he was involved with gun running at one time. And when I said, I pressed him on it, I says, excuse me, did you just say that you're involved with gun running? And he goes, well, I'm not going to go into it. I says, yeah, just leave that hanging out there, guy, because chances are, you know, you're being monitored or whatever. And so, you know, that's the thing, is that what we're dealing with here is we're dealing with a conspiracy. As I say, this is probably the worst massacre that has happened on U.S. soil since 9/11, and it's obvious that the media has lost track of the narrative. The police have lost track of the narrative. The timelines are being fudged. What do you make of that?
It's all correct. You're right on it, and all senses of it. The media is not to be trusted. The alternative media gets it wrong, like I get it wrong. I don't know. And the bottom line is, probably we'll never know what it really was about. It won't work like that because they'll have so many different directions. You know, there'll be a gun running thing here, there'll be a FEMA experiment there, there'll be a bribe off here, there'll be some money deposited there, there'll be a girlfriend in Singapore, there'll be a false herring in, I don't know, man.
I was talking with a judge today, actually, a retired judge, and he was saying to me that one of the things that wasn't reported in the mainstream, and I saw this, and I was shocked, that apparently there was an attempted bombing in an airport, and there was an ex-Marine that wanted to bomb an airport. And when they asked him, because what he was doing is he was going to set the bomb for 6 a.m. during the biggest commute. I think it was in North Carolina, actually. He was going to do this. And when they asked him why he was going to do it, he said, well, I want to start World War III. And I'm wondering, could this be that there are a number of people, or at least a civil war in the United States, could it be that a number of people are banking on the idea that something like Las Vegas, or maybe even a domestic terror attack, would be basically the way to spark a civil war in America?
I don't know. You don't really want to see what a combat vet is like when it gets a hair up its ass. I'm not kidding. And, you know, independently, not even talking about organized militias, but just a single combat vet getting upset at what's happening in his country. I can only guess how this is going to play. When I was closer to Dennis Kucinich, he said that the United States, he called himself the president of the Midwest, by the way, when he was doing that. He said that the United States was probably going to fragment into 9 continents or provinces. And that's plan 2 on Agenda 21, because, of course, it's easier to rule a bunch of small countries as it is one large one. You know, I don't know. And I'm a nerd. I don't even go in those kinds of places. I don't think like that. Thank you. You know, I would rather be, put eyes open, be careful out there, because you can't trust anything anymore except your gut. And that's where the true answers are that I'm discovering, is right there in your stomach. And it's always, the first thing that you suspect is always most likely true. Is this real? The first imprint is what you really should always pay attention to.
I've been doing a lot of research into what scientists are saying about reality, and how reality is right in front of you. Usually, everybody's reality is different. Yeah. So everybody is living in an alternative reality. We have groups that want to bring into one reality a collective. Yeah. But the truth is, we all have an individual reality. This is the way we see the world. This is the way we are. In your reality, what do you see coming for the United States?
Well, things always work out in the end. If things aren't working out, it's not yet the end. That's the Beatles. Yeah. Okay, let's start there. Always the rule is change. That's always the change is always the rule. That means you're not in control. Control is a fantasy. And so you have choices. That's what made you God's favorite. And my choice is to say that what's happening is an opportunity for us to change the way it is and make it better the way we want it. This is I'm going to change the movie concept. And I know that I don't know. And so I do know that you, just in talking to me this last 10 minutes or so, probably have created as many as 100 altered states of consciousness where you took something I just said and went off in your mind with it. When you do that, you have created a closed universe system in a multiverse. And that is a closed system. It's not real. It's not real. There's a Japanese movie called Lucid Dream. That's a good place to start, where that's closer to facts and reality than consciousness is. This state that we're in right now is a good state to, I don't know, have your beliefs become tools in a toolbox where I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't have believed it. And once you get that metaphor and start training your mind, now you can change what's actually being perceived as why they did what they did in Las Vegas. I can tell you that there's more likely 5 different reasons that whole thing happened, and each one built upon itself to fray and dissuade and to mislead. And that's how they play it. And if you start putting in artificial intelligence on top of that, you know, like a D-Wave technology that can predict what you're going to think 28 minutes before you do, well, how's that play for the movies?
Well, I mean, a lot of people have brought up to me as well in email and in conversation that the 5G, bringing 5G into the matrix is going to actually open the door for things like D-Wave and what D-Wave is going to do. How is that going to affect our cognitive liberty?
Well, we're going to be completely exposed for our personal beliefs and choices and things to the point where a 3rd generation D-Wave could absolutely, they're using that now in crime detection in Chicago to predict a crime before it occurs. And the Mossad just recently arrested 400 Palestinians for future crimes. We're in a matrix situation just like in the movies. And believe this or not, that's where it starts. It's not in science. Science is a closed system just like religion is. That's why you have 2 brains. And it's a cavitation process where it's closed and mutually exclusive, except when one universe goes through another universe, it creates a 3rd universe that is its own unique thing. And that's what we call the multiverse of options and possibilities. And I'm going to tell you that Las Vegas is like that. I'm certain that FEMA was doing an experiment. I'm certain he was a gun runner. I'm certain down the hall he was moving some opium poppy. And then, of course, the FBI wanted to come in and take advantage, so they brought some killers in. You know, when Ukraine and Russia happened, how is it that both sides were killed by the same rifle? Now,
well,
you know,
it's because of these deals. I mean, we're making these deals to destabilize life, destabilize the lifestyle of Americans. I mean, and what we do is we get into the head. And as you say, I mean, if we bring in the D-Wave technology, we'll be able to analyze what about 4th Amendment for the head? I mean, you know, unlawful search, seizure, and exposing brain and thought.
5G technology. That's what it's about with smart meters, where it can lift personal information from a dozen different sources. That's how I read it. I don't know, of course. I just am in lockdown. I have Wi-Fi that I'm now turning off. I have protocols that I do with Tor browser. I'm trying to keep myself clean, but my handler found 5 bugs in my home. And I'm not a person of interest. I'm just an old man. Why would they want to bug my bedroom?
Well, because of your knowledge and your background. I mean, what is your background? I mean, your background has been in intelligence for the longest time.
I'm a nerd. I'm not a spook.
Mind control. Well, I'm not saying you're a spook. Yeah, what I'm saying is that you have background knowledge because of the mind control experiments and things that have been done.
I know. That's the other bad part of it, is that I know something I don't know.
You know something that you don't want to give.
That's right. I know it, but I don't know it enough to be concerned or focused on it, but somebody's very worried about what I'm thinking.
Well, of course. And so what is it?
What happened 4 years ago was Carnegie Mellon. When I discovered fullerenes, I discovered the positive side with exclusion zone water, like we're finding with Cliff High's talking about now with fixing telomerase with olive oil. However, you put deuterium in it. Now what you have is a neutron fullerene fusion bomb that was deployed in 9/11 on Building 7. And I was in the process of coming up with the trigger mechanism that was done by Carnegie Mellon for Lockheed's teleportation laser. And let me tell you what happened next. I had to stop 2 personal friends of mine from Grants Pass that had been put on payroll to come in and wipe my hard drive. It happened to me. I caught them. I can name names. And I'm an asset, so they're not going to just take me out. But they don't want me doing certain kinds of studies or directions of my study, and so they throw distractions on me. And that's me being controlled as an asset. It's crazy.
What is so valuable, Richard, that you have, that you think you have?
I don't know. That's the part of it. I don't know. Say, if I knew, I wouldn't even be talking about it. I have no clue. That's the part of it I don't know. I don't know what it is. I know, I must know something.
Don't you feel violated? I mean, isn't this like a form of gang stalking in a way?
Gang stalking. More like a sock hop with muggers. It's crazy. It's crazy. No, it's not a good one. It gives you the visual of how I'm feeling. I'm being dogged at every point. Little things. I'm on radio this morning, and I'm offline. How does that work? I'm with CenturyLink. I'm using a landline.
So somebody cut you off. What were you talking about when they cut you off?
Who knows? Oh, well, we're talking about the gold that isn't in Fort Knox and why. But naming some names on, individuals that had something to do with that. Goldfinger, that guy. Well, it's pretty straightforward that nothing we know is real. And when a high school kid, millennium, that's what we'll call them, millennials, can't use a tape measure to measure out what 7 3/4 inches is, how's that work? That's why Diamond and Home Depot are now having put out a bunch of videos to educate people on how to measure wood. I can't believe it, because the people in the neighborhood don't know how to do that. If I were to say, I want you to show me on this measure tape here where 3 5/16 is, they couldn't do it.
And why do you think that's the case?
Well, because they're dumbing down America, making it leaving no child behind. That was Bush. And today, with the way the educational system is in Grants Pass, in Oregon, there's a 73% graduation in high school. I don't know what it's like up in Portland, but down here it's 73%. And newsflash, our judicial system and our courts and our law enforcement are in they're broken. Josephine and Jackson County is broken. I don't know what Portland's like. I can only guess, but I can tell you that we don't have any Hill Street Blues down here other than what's married to Carol Rosen. He and Chief Daniels. That's all we've got down here. I have friends from law enforcement that came up here, and they won't have anything to do with the law enforcement, so they went into animal control, and it turns out the dogs, there was a serial killer up here. It's leaving cigarette butts inside animals that it would kill. And it was a dogfighting effort by the local police that's their signature for, if you don't pay your bill, this is what happens to your animal. That's Josephine County. I don't know what's going on in Jackson County, but that's what we've got down here. How does that feel for you? And that's Oregon, free state of Jefferson. It's
extortion. It's threatening to kill an animal if you don't pay up, you don't pay your bill.
And we have werewolves and Wolf Creek. You've heard about that.
Of course, that's always been the case. Dogmen at Wolf Creek and werewolves.
I know.
But they all these things are being talked about all over the country right now, but they're not being talked about in the forefront. They're being talked about in the background.
Oh, that's right. And when you mentioned North Carolina earlier, I had to laugh. I snickered because that's where a lot of it's occurring. I have friends that are in Boone I've grown up with, and paramilitary and like we have Rogue River recruiting on here. We have Ku Klux Klan. It's all here. Crazy.
Yeah, well, I mean, the world is crazy. The world is. It just seems to me, as I said, the world is in a fugue state right now. It's a confused we don't have an identity, so therefore we're going to try to seek a new identity, and if that means we're going to kill people in the process, we do it. And there's funding going into this type of insanity. What do you make of that? What do you make of the idea that these cottage industries and these fragmented groups, these collectives, are basically breaking up the country?
Washington lobbying. That's what it is. It's lobbying for, you know.
Who's behind it, you think?
You name it. Any organization that, I don't know. I'm more of a scientist. I hang out in the laboratory and I try to make understanding of how, you know, that steel beam that was 617 feet dissolves in thin air as it's falling in free fall. How's that work? That's only a plasma from a physics point of view. That's what I can do. So I went out to try to figure out what could cause that. And it's a carbon nanotube, a new type of deployment weapon. They're deploying it everywhere. Russia just went off with one. It's everywhere. And that's a fullerene neutron fusion bomb. And I can show you how it works precisely using deuterium rather than exclusion zone water in a 4.2 nanometer spread on your diamond ball, your C60s. That's what they're using. And if you put exclusion zone water in that, that becomes the finest antioxidant the world knows in terms of radiation sickness and isolating radiation, nuclear radiation in the body. However, if you don't use exclusion zone water, if you take that out and you put deuterium in it, now what you have is the other side of dark.
And what is that, the other side of dark?
Yeah, imagine that. It's like going into a blacker hole. It's a weapon. And it's a weapon of destruction that the Mossad has been deploying everywhere on Golan Heights and Giza. They gave that weapon to the United States. They were not in charge of 9/11, but that's where it was first experimentally deployed. If you put a little bit of it in on an airplane, you can have no forensics.
Nothing left, all dust.
Nothing left. And I wrote that paper, and that paper I'll be happy to send to you for posting because it runs down precisely, including the patents on where it came from. And that's a weapon that is now being used everywhere.
So I remember reading somewhere about experimental weapons that were being used in the Middle East. Are these the type of weapons you're talking about?
Yes. Yes. Nanotubes. And the other side of it is going to make a space elevator that connects to the, you know, the satellite up in space. There'll be big fibers rolling in space that are like elevators rather than using the expensive fuel things. And the reason
I've heard about the space elevator. I just haven't been able to conceptualize it. Something
it's in the article. I even have the company in Japan that's developing the nanotube. So that's a device that is 100 times stronger than diamond. When you take, and that is most likely, Sir Roger Penrose talks about it at Princeton. That's when the body when you die, there is a 3.2 ounce weight loss at the moment of your death. And that turns out to be a nanotube of structured water. That's your so-called physical analog for the soul. It goes back into the multiverse. It goes right straight there. And
that's interesting. It's structured water, but it's a nano.
It's in a nanotube.
A nanotube, and a small. So the spirit or the soul is another form of water that comes out.
You call that in Eastern philosophy, that's called the chi. That's on the outer surface of the body and is the primary mechanism to describe the physical functioning of how acupuncture works. How you can poke the right arm and there's a reaction in the left arm. Done with nanotubes, and that's your guy down in, Hammeroff. Hammeroff was in diapers when we first proposed that at the UW. That was Dr. Burgess, Dr. Black, and Dr. Peter Winter. And they were in Clinic 7 doing studies on acupuncture with Dr. Chu that had been brought over as the barefoot doctor from China. And there was a ring of anesthesiologists that were studying it, and we came up with the model of a nanotube. That's where the nanotube concept first came into being with carbon. And now Jerry Pollack, who is professor emeritus in anesthesiology there, he was my lead, by the way, in 1970, is the one that wrote Exclusion Zone Water and doing the easy water concepts. However, water has many faces. And one of them is deuterium and tritium, and you can mine that in the oceans down near Antarctica. There's huge quantities of deuterium in the oceans there. And that's where they get it. And deuterium is an isotope of water, just like H3O2 or exclusion zone water is. And so all of these concepts are being used, and the first action is not in medicine or for the benefit of man. It's as a weapon. And that's what they're doing. And that's what they're doing probably in Las Vegas. Who knows? Who knows? I can only guess. If they did this in 2001, what do you think they're doing 16 years later?
Well, they're improving upon all of the different weapons. I mean, I was just reading the other day that the Chinese have developed a way to teleport, but they're doing particles. I mean, it's like, okay, we can say.
Well, they're doing more than particles now. They're doing bits of information, which is even more than particles. Actually, the Chinese have developed a way of moving a large block of information like a message. Cannot be encrypted, doesn't need to be encrypted, it can't be broken. And that's teleportation, and that's Lockheed. And the trigger mechanism for firing this thing, and I've got the physics of exactly how the trigger works and everything, is and this is all technology from 2000 and, I don't know. I wrote that paper in 2014. The good part was published in Nexus, the bad part was unpublished.
And what is the bad part?
The part of the dark side of nanotubes.
And they'll be utilizing them for what in the future? Mental attacks, physical attacks?
Tactical weapons.
What's that?
Tactical weapons where they can put an implant in you and then you can disappear, just like in Star Trek.
Speaking of implants, there's been a lot of talk lately about throwing out microchip RFID implants in 2018 that they'll be as easy as getting a tattoo. What do you have to say about these implants that are going to be proposing RFID?
Good luck on that, man. That's again like your 5G technology and your smart meters. You don't want to have anything to do with them. And right now, North Korea is probably going to try to drop us off the grid, put us back into the Stone Age. Think they can do that?
With an EMP weapon?
Oh, yeah.
Do you believe they have an EMP weapon that could carry this problem out?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I don't know if they have a large thermonuclear weapon, but they certainly can do a bomb flash. Absolutely. I can do one just from my kitchen.
Well, and that's that brings up another thing. They call it. I was reading something the other day about kitchen sink terrorism. That there's a new type of terrorism called kitchen sink terrorism, where people can make bombs from simple things like hydrogen peroxide and several other things. They can mix like Clorox with something else to create gas and everything. Is this kitchen sink terrorism something we need to be aware of?
Kitchen sink terrorism is when you squirt a rabid dog with ammonia.
Okay.
That'll stop a rabid dog. Squirt, squirt, squirt. That was one I learned when I was 10 years old, before I was part of the anarchist cookbook. That's a terrorism, and bleach is your friend. And those will be the two things left in a store that haven't been taken when the store is empty.
It's Clorox.
Yeah, and ammonia. Squirt, squirt, squirt. And for those zombie crowds, you can, I know it gets better. You can use a water cannon like we do in our Whitewater, party hardy cannon. You do a water cannon full of ammonia and watch how that stops all the police, not just one or two.
Squirt, squirt, squirt.
Yeah, a water cannon, kawoosh, where it's dispersed. Now that's simple, kitchen chemistry, just like making ayahuasca or dimethyltryptamine out of crabgrass in your kitchen.
What? You can make DMT out of crabgrass?
I wrote that book also. Would you like a copy?
How to make DMT out of crabgrass.
Yeah, and I also have lab notes just on the background, just for those extra special questions you have. You bet, with pictures. I grew that 5-pound crystal for Terrence McKenna. I did that at the UW under a hood.
You talking about cooking a crystal of some kind?
Well, dimethyltryptamine is a toxin, just like lysergic acid, diethylamide. When you take acid, it's out of your body within 10 minutes because the body freaks out and produces an overabundance of its own neurotransmitter, which is lysergic acid amide. And what happens next is the 20 hours of your reaction is from your own body's response and jump-starting your brain. So that now, because that particular neurotransmitter is the one for connecting dots. Aha. That's right. Now, once you learn how to use these different neurotransmitters, you can do things you can't, as a human being, do now. And that's the next evolutionary stage in man.
So you're talking about brain enhancements. You're talking about drugs that enhance the cognitive faculties of the brain, and that these.
Well, let's see here. I've got a book here. Here's a friend of mine just wrote this special book called on medicines. He's up 3 PhDs out of. He was the editor of Omni. It's called Psychedelic Healing. Next century, all of our medicines will be psychedelic mushrooms and other related compounds like that. Those will be our primary medicines.
And what will they be using these forms of LSD? What will they be using them for?
To jumpstart the use and access to your own neurotransmitters, because you don't know how to do them yet with your own mind's eye.
So it will be a way of, just like what they're doing with cannabis now, where they give you certain types of cannabis that enhance certain parts of the brain. It used to be that you just smoked something, you were taking your chances. Now you have different types. You have ithacas. You have.
Well, there's different things between cannabinoids and cannabinoids, and those are different. One blocks pain, the other does this. You know, that kind of thing. I can tell you that when you're taking a mind alterant, you are performing an act of magic. Magic is the art of changing consciousness at will. That's the new direction in physics, to learn how to control these neurotransmitters or altered states of consciousness as tools in a toolbox. When I watch a woman rip a car door off, a flaming automobile to save her daughter, and everybody gets it, can understand that. How is that possible when the bone in her body isn't nearly as strong as that steel door? And that's because an ant in an altered state can pick up 10 times its weight. Now,
I heard that as well, that, we all hear that story of, you said, like the woman ripping the door off of a car or lifting a car off of a child that's dying. People say, well, obviously the adrenaline had something to do with it, and it might. Yeah. But what keeps the bones from breaking? And that's the psi energy that most martial artists learn. That's why they can break through
the chi.
The chi.
That's right. The microturbule of structured water.
Because they focus that.
And well, I'm going to say, just taking your water from a well or wherever your water comes from, and just by pouring it into a funnel before it goes into the glass you drink, if you do it clockwise, you will restructure that water to such an extent that 60% of it now will go into the body rather than the urine. And that's just all yeah, exactly. Just blessing the water kills vampires. Well, I mean,
metaphorically.
Well, get a grip, man. What do you think structured water is about? Where psyche is brought into matter.
Well, you know that there's a lot of people don't know this about vampires. I mean, if you study the Malleus Maleficarum and other sacred texts and whatever, vampires actually, and I don't know if anybody knows this, but it's because I study the paranormal, I study all that. Vampires are afraid of running water. It's not just the wine. It's not just that. It's the idea of the flowing water. They call them the running waters of Christ, or the flowing waters of baptism.
And the Syrian witchcraft, they call that, crossing running water will get a witch off your trail.
Yeah, that's what it says in Malleus Maleficarum. You can trap a witch or you can trap a vampire because they will not cross running water. They're just afraid to. And another thing about vampires,
I can use my urine as a running water. I could create a weapon.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, squirt.
Squirt. Exactly. Now we're on the same page, man.
You did this to me.
I know I did. It's all my fault. I take full responsibility.
Damn you. No, I just the thing is that I don't think a lot of people realize that, when it comes to water, and I learned this. There's a lot of things about water people understand. It also cleanses the air. It's a cleanser for everything. It's probably And in fact, vaporized water is one of the biggest greenhouse gases out there, believe it or
And
not.
it
So
turns out,
what do they want to do
the
for
smallest
global warming is they want to remove water. They want to remove carbon dioxide. They want to, I think they're confused as to what the planet needs in order to be healthy and what the mind needs in order to be healthy. And that's one of the reasons why it's getting easier to invade the mind and to actually take away what I call cognitive liberty. And that's why I call the show Cognitive Liberty, because it all has to do with what we do in the altered state of mind, the magic, as you say, to alter that state of mind in order to pull forward engineering that is unseen. And it's the psi
I'm reminded, yeah, I'm reminded of Johnny Depp and when he said, "What do you mean we, white man?"
What?
Well,
When he played Tonto?
Oh man, you have to understand that I would think that almost 90% of all healing processes are what you personally believe is going on inside your body.
Well, there's such a thing as positive.
There it is.
Positive attitude and the idea of telling yourself you are something and manifesting it. Manifestation is real. Tulpas are real. Thought forms are real, and they can manifest into the real world. In fact, Stephen Hawking told me that when I talked with him about tachyon, and I talked to him about the ether, and I talked to him about, in fact, we had a discussion about the belief in Santa Claus of all things, and how, to a child, Santa Claus is very real. In the ether, a child can shake hands with Mickey Mouse, and it's because somewhere out there, the conception, and we also talked about Star Wars, the idea of the Star Wars characters were in the concepts of the minds of the creators, but somewhere out there, it wouldn't be beyond the pale to think that there is a universe like Star Wars, or there is a Darth Vader or a Kylo Ren or something, because of the fact that in the mind, it's generated there, but where does it manifest? It has to manifest somewhere. You're talking about these multiverses where there could be worlds where all things are this way or that way, where we have androids that are basically war tools, and we're developing ourselves into that same multiverse, that same idea.
So for those more techie that are listening to this, if you want to know where we're going with the math, it's gone from string theory into knot theory and Kaufman's mathematics. If you'd like to see how membrane physics has now evolved, you from Bessel functions and the old ways of looking at what we call drum physics. I have a concern because, well, I'm changing my movie and hopefully leaving footprints for others to follow. I have a series of audiobooks that I've just come out to start a foundation on pathworking. And that's what I'm about right now. And that's what I'm writing about.
Pathworking, you mean like meta walks and things of that nature?
No, like getting union with self, having dialogue with your higher self. The other 9/10 of your cerebral cortex that you're somehow not in tune with, but called instinct.
How do we begin to get in touch with that?
There are toys that are written up in my Power Tools book, of course. Those were the protocols I developed for Navy SEAL. Today, I'm doing the third book in that series, which is called The Non-Local Mind in a Holographic Universe. And that is how to change the movie using pathworking. And from there, it comes out with a foundation in metaphysics, goes with my audiobooks. And then I have 12 books ready for press called The Holistic Kabbalah. It's pathworking. It's out magic, systems of magic. Everybody gets there differently. But I'm going to show you how I did it so that you have a metaphor to brace your own way of doing journaling, whatever you want.
This dawns on me as to why we're speaking at a Comic-Con, because you're basically talking about people finding their superhero instincts, basically tapping into what Philip K. Dick called was that he said that we all had superhero powers. It's only that here on Earth we don't know how to utilize them, and what we all, in some, what was he saying? In fact, I interviewed his wife. Something about telekinetic, that we're all pretty much telekinetic or psychokinetic. And
that psyche is brought into matter.
Right. So we don't know that, though. I think a lot of people in this country and around the world, some people do. The enlightened ones know. But what they don't know is that we have the ability to move matter with our minds and with we
already are moving matter with our minds. We just don't see it because we're choosing to see something else.
Well, and if you read the Bible, they tell you that that's faith. Faith the size of a mustard seed can move a mountain. Well, what they're really saying is it's not necessarily faith, but basically intent with the idea of moving a mountain can be done, and all you need is just a little bit of that intent to focus, and you'll get it. It may not be utilized in the way you wish, but scheming and plotting and actually using the psi power can move things. You can get people.
Okay, this is the most important point I can make here. The difference between intent and purpose, why you're actually here, is where the magic happens. The distance between intent, which actually happens at the end of the day, and purpose, why you're physically here. Now that they're different. They're like slightly different. That's why you have karma and all this other nonsense that goes with what happens in your behavior and all of that. Because when you're doing purpose, you're in complete harmony with your environment, whether it's been invaded or not. That means you're an asset. You're not a liability. That's what we are as a metaphor.
Either we choose to be causal beings, which means we create and we produce and we make things happen, or we become acausal, where our existence doesn't matter, where we're just here and we're observing. And I think a lot of people see themselves as acausal. I think a lot of people see themselves as amoral. And I would say that, we need to be focused on mentally picturing a future that is thriving. I think too many people now have taken on the cause of retrocausality in a way where they see that things written in the Bible, things written in other prophecies are so dooming and damning that I think we've basically given up, and that we're in this, as I said, a fugue state of mind where we're losing our identity. We don't know who we are. That's why we're tearing down statues. That's why we're burning certain flags. That's why we're kneeling at the football game.
There's a new movie out that's called Adam that I posted on Facebook just 2 days ago. A short brief on that, like Star Trek. It's called Adam, and where in the distant future you're transhumanistic, and you can't remember who you are or why.
Let's talk about transhumanism for a moment. I was talking with Gon Shimura about the idea of AI becoming the new God. And it was right after we said this that Google Mind and Alphabet now, they are in pursuit of creating the artificial intelligent God. And I think a lot of people do not know this. I mean, I remember we were all worried about the God particle being found at CERN, but now should we be concerned about technology and the technocracy creating an artificial intelligent God that will be part of the transhumanistic experience? What
a transhumanistic God would represent. I wrote about that in high school when I was a high school student, and they turned on something like the Forbin Project, and they asked, "Is there a God?" And
like Colossus, yes.
And Colossus responded, "There is now."
Is that what Colossus said?
No, that's what I wrote.
Oh, okay. So, so what you created this?
In high school.
You created like the Colossus Forbin Project type computer.
Yeah, everything in the movie Person of Interest. Have you noticed that they all die?
I guess. I mean,
like Texas.
But see, let's go back to that Colossus metaphor that you just threw out there. I think it's fascinating.
And then the second one that came out, Demon Seed.
Yeah, I remember Demon Seed.
Yeah.
And that's where what was the name of the computer? It wanted to reproduce.
Impregnated by a computer and has a baby, a human.
That's the theme of Blade Runner as well. The idea that the transhumanism is basically that a baby was born that was part android, part human. And that's
what you are.
With nanotechnology and the nanoparticles and the nanotubes you talk about, it was something went into the mix. And then, of course, we have Lawnmower Man, where something came into the mix. Basically, I mean, but this is possible with the idea of how we can expand the mind with, like you say, psychedelics. We can also expand the brain with neural networks being tapped into computers. They're going to be able to hook the internet into the brain. And so basically the cognitive recall will be taken from the computers.
I was actually in a lab next door to what's his face when he was at the UW. He later went to Yale. This guy was doing chip implants in monkeys back then. Delgado, that's his name. I remember him now. He was in the lab next to mine, and he was doing in the University of Washington chip implants under John Bonica. And it was Harry Fink on 4th floor that we were doing those studies, and they actually had an interface chip that would interface and had neural networking, which are like dendrites. By the way, that's vasopressin. You can grow more dendrites using vasopressin and increase your access just by squirting it up your nose as an anterior pituitary hormone. Yeah.
Squirt, squirt.
Huh?
Squirt, squirt.
Just like in the movies, man. One is this way and one is that way.
I mean, I know we're laughing about it because, you know,
well, there's not much else you can do.
I know we're laughing about it. People probably think we're just talking out of our south ends here.
I'm not.
True. There is so many, and that's one of the reasons why I thought it was vital to do a show like this about cognitive liberty, because it's about the brain. It's all about brain mapping and brain science. In fact, what's interesting about going back to Stephen Paddock, of course, the so-called killer in the Las Vegas situation, Las Vegas massacre. Apparently, when he worked for Raytheon and when he worked for Lockheed Martin, he also worked for Thiokol. But when he worked for Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, he was involved with accounting for mind science patents, which means that, you know, here we have mind science and AI once again being a part of this, and that's, I mean, you look at all the other killers, like the Aurora killer. What was he in? He was in the Super Soldier program, creating candy bars with a certain kind of flavonoid that when they eat the candy bar, they become super soldiers. That's what, you know, that was what James Holmes was involved with.
That's how you stimulate memory with those odoriferous molecules.
Right.
That's how you do it. Yep. I've been writing about this for a long time for the military. And I can tell you, I don't know. And if I don't know, what do you think that might suggest? We've been invaded. And I have no idea what it is. You can talk about you know, the Anunnaki and Enlil and all the rest of it. There's a war going on, and man's Malcolm in the middle. Hasn't got a clue what's going on.
So you're saying this is part of an infiltration program, either alien or otherwise?
I think that it's worse than infiltration. It's infiltration by several differing cults, aliens, groups, whatever, that have ulterior motives and are disinterested in the others. And so there's a war going on above us, and we're just basically in the middle catching flack. So
we're talking about an intel war here. We're talking about some sort of an intelligence war between the cabals and the secret societies and
whatever
intelligences that are way beyond what
there are life forms walking around right now. I did a BBC thing on the Anunnaki, not the Anunnaki, the Nephilim, and there was a skull discovered in 1820 in Pennsylvania that was, you know, a giant skull. Okay, we talk about the Watchers in Noah and Genesis, and we talk about the Nephilim, and then there are the Anunnaki and all the other experiments that man is. I knew Lloyd Pye when he had the Star Child. I looked at the Star Child, and that bone structure indicated it was probably something out of Hopi, a mysticism called the Ant-Men, where they touched skulls rather than doing pheromone for communication, and that they had dendrite in the skull itself. What I wanted to do with that Star Child was send it up to UBC and look for DNA in the bone stitches for neurotransmitters, or, you know, dendrite material.
Dendrite material.
Well, we're experiments. What's that fourth genome in our blood type? Rhesus negative. Where did that come from? And how come you don't remember your past lives?
Well, and they're now, I don't know if you know this or not, but they're now having to rewrite the entire fossil record because they're finding now that there was a ghost species or an unknown species that mankind mated with to create perhaps Homo sapiens sapien or even Gigantopithecus, which a lot of people believe may be the upright walking hominid known as Bigfoot. But it's just that this idea now
an offshoot of Nephilim.
What's that?
An offshoot of Nephilim.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
That's what I said. It's a giant creature that may have been part of some alien breeding process that, I mean, they don't call it alien breeding because, of course, they leave that to things like panspermia and other theories about life coming from space and basically taking hold here. But just the idea of a ghost species, as they call it, being involved with a DNA lock that is
I don't think we see ourselves. I don't believe in the creationism, and I don't believe in evolution. Now, where does that leave me? If neither of those
panspermia.
Well,
panspermia.
That's right. Neo-paganism rules.
Is that what neo-pagans believe?
No, but stranger in a strange land when you eat Raoul. I just, yeah, I can give you, see, you just went into
You
four
have
or
so
five
many canned metaphors that make me laugh because I can relate to them. That's how a teacher works, I guess, is that you have some of the best metaphors to throw in there, and
You
people
just
just
mix
laugh
it
because
up.
they're so true. What's that?
You got to remove the bay leaf.
Remove the bay leaf. And other leaves too, right?
Well, just trying to, you know, keep it right.
That's exactly right. So I know that you are constantly studying, you're constantly reading, you're a mind out of control because you're always reading and always studying. What are you focusing on now as your work, as you're working behind the scenes to try and change the paradigm?
I'm saying that as alchemy led to chemistry, so now physics will lead to magic. It'll be advanced physics with a mystery school. And there'll be several of them, like you find in Dune. You know, there'll be the Bene Jesuits and the religious group there and the fundamentalists there. And they'll use those energies as a way of controlling their part of reality. But ultimately, it'll come down to Vin Diesel when he did, what was that, after Armageddon, or what it was, that one movie he did with that strange girl that was born. I forget what was it called.
Oh, it was
Yeah.
originally called Nightfall. I can't remember what it was.
No, but that's a good one too. You want to watch the two Russian called Day Watch and Night Watch in Russia about vampire patrol. There are life forms among us now that are not human. That's one of the things I did for the military. There is.
Okay, so what can you tell me about I've always had a fascination with Hitler's werewolf armies. What can you tell me about the werewolf armies?
I have no idea about lichen and vampires. That's another series out. There is a werewolf running supposedly down out of Wolf Creek that's been there for several hundred years. There is a shapeshifter down here in the Medford area that was supposed to be 400 years as a shapeshifter. I have actually encountered that entity. I don't know what it is. You know, it looked as a dog, and then it ran straight at me and went right through my legs as a puff of smoke. Ran off as a coyote. It happened. And I was actually documented with witnesses. So who knows what that all means? The vortex, the Oregon vortex. We did studies on that just locally, and I was at almost 40,000 feet with an interferometer. And there's only one thing in nature I know that will bend light at 40,000 feet. And that's a mini black hole. And so I think there are all kinds of anomalies on the Earth that we don't understand yet.
We have what was it? They were saying that Einstein's Rosen bridges are real, which are random vortexes that appear on the planet, and they most certainly are time vortexes and differentials and bridges.
Skinwalker Ranch, you know, there it is, Skinwalker Ranch out of Utah.
That's exactly what that is. And I remember Wolfgang Gossett used to tell me, the guy who basically confessed that he was D.B. Cooper, he said to me many times that there was a vortex over the Skinwalker Ranch, but at the time no one knew what Skinwalker Ranch was. They just knew it was the mesa out in Duchesne, out in the Uinta Basin. So, you know, if you want to go out to the entire Uinta Basin, that is pretty much a haven for UFOs, weird activities,
stuff out there.
Time travel. What's that?
There's all kinds of creepy things out there. I know that I probably will never know either. A lot of this stuff I'm now discovering is not knowable in any century. Doesn't work like that. Like it's a process. Let me give you an example. If I said, Simon says you can go halfway to the door, you start focusing on the door as your object. But actually, it's not even about the door, because you will never actually, with that protocol, ever reach the door. What it is, it's about the journey. And so you get sidetracked or, you know, distracted. And that's what you do. You have to keep your eye on the ball. That's what called training the mind, and why all saints throughout history have stressed the importance of training the mind.
So we all have the potential to be seers. We all have the potential to be precogs, being able to see the future, being able to at least draw to us a future that we want, rather than a future that has been forced upon us.
There's Hopi, Trebinder, the Senoi. That's Richard Kaplan and Dream Manuals. It has to do, there are states of consciousness that have more reality than conscious waking states. One of those is lucid dreaming. And that place, you're probably going back home like you do at the moment of death, where you go back on a temporary basis. There are, in the Upanishads, they talk about that with the Shabad, S-H-A-B-D, or sound current, where you go back home to Sachkhand. I remember I had a hypnotherapist that was training me to become a hypnotherapist, and you had to do regression. And the usual regression is, you know, going back to a childhood and reframing something, but most people wanted to go into past lives. My teacher decided to take me into a future life. And my advantage on that was I was now not human, I was something else. And I remember coming back and how humanity evolved to that state because of my memory thing. And now, is it real? I don't know. If you go to, in hypnosis, if you hypnotize somebody and take them down into the reticular activating center and or right next door called the Wernicke correction, every single one of you will have a memory of having worked on Mars for the US government. How does that work? That's an archetypal thing. And if you do Wernicke correction, comma, Mars project, see what that brings up. That'll be an interesting little side bit for you, because something else is going on here.
I think that, I guess, to summarize everything, we can say that a lot of the life itself, I guess, is an alchemical process. It's an alchemical experiment that the mind itself gives us the stage. What we do with the mind is how the stage will operate, and whether or not the final curtain will be the idea of doom or raising the curtain to something that we desire rather than something that was, like I say,
God's chosen. That was what made us God's chosen. We have choice. And how did Albert Einstein put it?
That's great. Dr. Richard Allen Miller, it's such a pleasure always to be with you. And if you have any final statements before we close.
Yeah, I'm a starving artist. Feel free to support my books at richardallenmiller.com/shop. That's where it is. And I've got lots more where that came from.
All right, Richard Allen Miller, such a joy to have you on the program. And thank you so much for being on this edition of Cognitive Liberty. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.